Well, folks, here we are again. This is Thrifty Gamer 83 here, just bringing you my take on where Sega went wrong. Sega at one time was one of the best console developers. It had a strong roster of intellectual properties. What went wrong? Was it mismanagement, or was it merely the fact that it bombarded the market with so many useless consoles which would become obsolete within months of the original PlayStation being released? From my perspective, the answer to that is the bombardment and the mismanagement. Bernard Stoller owes a large part of this mismanagement. His entire style and aesthetic was based off of just giving gamers what they wanted in terms of cheap entertainment packages. You didn't really have to think too hard with what Stoller was going to do or where he was going to take the company. In an ill-fated venture, he decided against role-playing games, despite the critical acclaim to the Shining Force series. Instead, what followed was blunderful entertainment itself. The entertainment value, though, with Stoller was incredibly high. The man managed to somehow run Sega all but into virtually being a third party. This is pointy-haired boss territory which we're discussing here. This is Dilbert at its finest. This is someone who so resembles the pointy-haired boss that really Sega of Japan must have been floored with how he critically mismanaged assets in the American partnership. To say that he was inflexible really is just something that you cannot ignore. He was at the key turning point of advising Sega of Japan as CEO of Sega of America on why not to bring role-playing games to the forefront like Nintendo had done in opening up an operational paradigm and business strategy. Instead, what we got was Bernie just looking lost, and Sega of Japan somehow followed suit. Through all of the mismanagement and bombardment of really obsolete technology as soon as it hit store shelves, the 32X, the Sega CD, virtually anything that you can name became obsolete, and due in large part to the PlayStation, companies were clamoring to find a way to compete. Nintendo released the Nintendo 64. They have managed to stay afloat. Sega released so many differing components to upgrade the aging Genesis that they really invested too much into keeping a dying project afloat, a dying product and project afloat, really. If you look at what had happened with Sega in the paradigm shift, which they went under to try just to keep the Genesis really out of either consumer loyalty, which was misguided in terms of you should have just upgraded the products. Not upgraded, but rather upgraded to newer systems. You could have sunk the entire project value into the Sega Saturn, but instead Sega was just lost. They flooded the market. They didn't know what they were doing. It was like giving the kid in the candy store an unlimited amount of money with a catch. The catch was not to flood his little penny bag, which he carried with the candy, with the same old flavors which he was used to try something new. And unfortunately, look what happened to Sega. Look at how they just thought they could impact the markets by flooding them with useless and obsolete technology. The Sega Saturn was a very nice system. The Sega 32X and the Sega CD were obsolete. It's one of those things where you bite your tongue and say yes, it helped Sega secure footing in new technologies, but it also meant the demise of what could have been by sinking so much into just what really shouldn't have been used at the time. The Genesis was aging. This was a result of Sega ignoring what its fan bases really wanted. Instead, Sega is now a third-party developer. They are no longer a first-party. They are no longer substantive enough with intellectual properties to really burst onto the console scene. Game over, man. Sega, for whatever reason, is done. And that is really sad to see. It's really sad to hear. But in the long run, what did them in was just trying to compete with so much aging hardware support that they really thought they could push and push and push the Sega Genesis completely. One of my favorite things out of the 90s era with the Sega Genesis was the Sega Channel, which was a cable modem which hooked into your Sega. Yes, I know it's one of those obsolete beyond obsolete beyond obsolete game mechanics, but it really inspired Valve and Steam. And when you talk about how you wanted to play games, the Sega Channel does have to come to mind. If you wanted to have cloud entertainment, something that you could actually play and enjoy, it inspired virtually every game service to date. That was the Sega Channel. That was so much fun back in the day. You could download Street Fighter 2 and host tournaments. It was just amazing, really, what you could do. I myself finally beat Shining Force on the Sega Channel, which was a major accomplishment. As for the Sega Channel itself, it faded into obscurity. It was much like the X-Band modem. It's something that you'll see or say, and we never heard from it again. And that really is a sad moment in the history of Sega, that with so much innovation and with so many consumers for the Sega Channel, that Sega just tried continually to push the Sega Genesis. The Sega Channel was obsolete, yes, but it also opened the doors and opened the eyes of investors for companies like Steam, Valve, and others to finally just spring forward. You also have the App Store, which is due in large part absolutely to Sega Channel with what it offers for gaming. And gaming on demand owes its livelihood to the Sega Channel. It's with the passage of time. As I said before, Sega was done. There was nothing they could really do to bounce back. What came next after all of the glad tidings I've said with the Sega Channel was that cold realization that the Sega Saturn had flopped, that the technologies that they had tried so hard to bombard the market with had flopped. And then finally you had the Dreamcast, which flopped by no fault of its own. That was largely due to Bernard Stoller just trying to sink his claws into the entertainment value of games. And it was a really sad thing to see that there were so many games like Elemental Gimmick Gear, which are ranked as some of the best of all times, but largely forgotten. As a core Sega user, as someone who owned a Dreamcast and now owns one again, I just cannot help but feel Bernard kind of slighted every Sega user. Every Sega fan who loved the games like Phantasy Star, Shining Force, by not wanting to put more effort and commitment into the role-playing enterprise, he doomed Sega as a first party, as a console developer. They went into the third-party market of software. As you can tell, this is the Sonic collection for the GameCube. It's one of those things which really brings back memories. It just doesn't feel the same as an original Sega console. Okay, folks, rant, rave, love, hate, click that subscribe button, folks. You're keeping my show on the air. Have a good one.